For men that women need to hear. I'm Angeline Longshore with Zelis Daniel. Hi, Zelis.
How you doing?
Good. I'm great. Feeling good. So today we're talking about something really fun. Why do men act the way they do? And women, you need to hear this. It's based on how women are that men are acting this way. So it's going to be a really interesting conversation. We've both been dying to talk about this. Men, I find when they're around women, especially the Karens of the world, if you don't know what that is, look it up. Um, they tend to act differently than if they're around their buddies, if they're around other people who they feel they don't have to be careful, defensive, on their best behavior around. There's a lot of reactions that are different. So I thought we'd break that down, unpack it, and have some fun with it.
Yeah, I think one thing, just to start with, is that men are a little afraid right now. It's like I feel like my partner and a lot of women are really critical, and it's like something that's come up with everything in our culture and our society, that it's like if you say the wrong thing, if you make the wrong gesture, if you're just joking and you say something, they're going to point it out, and it's going to be like held against us, where we're sloppy with words at times, and I feel like you kind of need to have a light heart about what your partner says and not take everything so literal, um, to make your life and your relationship enjoyable. You know what I mean? It's like, as
Totally.
our culture is moving and changing, we're walking on tippy toes, and it's difficult.
Yes, I see a huge difference in how men behave in different situations. And I like when they're relaxed, when they can be themselves, when they can be playful. And, that can be around women if they know that they're not going to be like that. But what
Yeah.
like that means, women, is this assumption that you have to be guarded, not guarded, but guard against a man taking advantage or doing something that's going to be like against your rights or something like that. I think it's almost instinctive for women now because they've been put into this role of this independent woman role that they're not even aware of necessarily. So that's why we're talking about it. But the men bear the result of it all.
Yeah, I think something that we're dealing with is the war on toxic masculinity, which is like,
I
it's
love that.
understandable, but the problem is we have these, double word phrases, and it's like it becomes a war on masculinity, and it's
Right.
everything that is masculine is treated as toxic masculinity, where it's like, we're men, we're supposed to be masculine. That's actually something that women are attracted to, and they're attracted to the masculine man. And so in this war on masculine, toxic masculinity, now we're trying to find the balance, where it's like, how can I be myself? How can I be this strong, confident, masculine male that you're attracted to? And I think what's happening is that's becoming deflated. It's like, you know, just the things that you were just gonna let not bother you in past and generations of our past, of like, that's just men, boys will be boys. Now it's like, no, you can't say that shit. You know what I mean? Like, that's not acceptable. And it's like, it used to be like, whatever, we don't take it to a heart. Like, boys will be boys, that's the shit they do. It's
Hmm.
like,
And if you look at little
and
boys,
now
that's
it's,
true.
yes, um I mean,
Men are
I
little
think it's
boys,
kind of
basically.
yeah, we're just grown up little boys. Well, we have different nature that is what makes us who we are, and it's like, there's if every animal on the planet is given these instinctive ideas in their brains, and that's what helps them survive. So men
Hmm.
and women have these same instinctual things of how to feed yourself, how to stay warm, how to procreate, what you're attracted to. It's like men are programmed to want to have sex, and women genetically are programmed to want to have babies, and they're kind of the same, but they're not.
The motivation is different. The
And
desire
it's
is
just
different.
genetics. So it's like, it doesn't matter how much you try to change our culture, you're pushing against 10,000 centuries of evolution.
Exactly.
So it's
Why?
gonna be a war.
Yeah, I mean, why? Yeah, that's what I was like. The war on toxic men. I was thinking like, I love that you're pointing that out because why are we in a war to begin with? Like, why can't we just talk? Why can't we just come to some peaceable agreement of, hey, this works, this doesn't. Okay, let's look at the things that aren't working. Let's kind of like, hash them out. How can we do that in a positive way? Rather than just constantly being at war against men, constantly trying to like fight the man in actually the man, not the man, but and it's like men can't win because women are just like dead set in their minds. The Karens are dead set of like, no matter what you say, no, talk to the
Yeah.
hand kind of thing. And how do you have a good relationship with someone when you do the no? There's no communication. And relationship is about communication, about understanding, about empathizing that means stepping into somebody's shoes to see where they're coming from, not what you want, not what you need, but
Hmm.
what does that person need and how do we bring those needs together? And I don't see that happening in relationships. That's the basis to good relationships. It's really simple, but I don't see that. I see women looking at their needs and feeling like they need to be the boss of everything to control so that they're not taken advantage of. And it comes from a deep fear for them, but the result is men cannot win. Like they just can't.
Well, the thing is the women aren't winning either.
No,
Nobody's winning.
no one's
And
winning.
so I think that, one of the bigger things to really kind of for women to realize is that it's like, hey, you're kind of running the show behind the scenes anyway. And so taking on this, I want to be in front of the scenes and I'm going to be, this strong, uh, you know, person that's going to go and call you out on your bullshit or whatever, is like, it's not going to make men feel comfortable. It's not going to get the end result in the overall family. It's going to, yeah, you're going to have your power, but you're not going to be happy with it. That's the question. Are you happy, Karen? Are you happy? It's like,
Right.
you don't seem
Are
happy.
your kids
you know
happy? No.
no. And I think that, something that would just really kind of touch to my mind as you were speaking is how, in this, like, we want to be treated as equals. Well, one of the real problems is that if we joke around with a woman the way we would joke around with another man, and make some derogatory comment, or just being our
Normal
male
self.
selves,
Yeah.
then it becomes insulting and they're not going to do it. And it's not all the time. I honestly, some of like the female friends that I really enjoy hanging out with are more of these like butch girls who can laugh and make jokes about it. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
like, they're going to be checking out that girl's butt too. It's like, if you're in that environment where that's okay, then you become relaxed. But it's like, if you're in a
Right.
room full of people that you feel like, I have to be acting as a feminist in order to be accepted in this environment right now, I'm not going to be genuinely myself. I'm going
Mm-hmm.
to be making an effort that isn't going to be fully genuine, and that's the way it's going to come off.
But
It's
isn't
like
it
one of the
even
reasons
more than
why.
being a feminist? Like you have to like be so careful.
Well, I mean, the truth of it is we're not always that careful, and
Mm.
that's why we're getting, they're getting the nooses out.
Right.
We're going to teach these men.
When I used to talk with dads in the parking lot at school, like we would be waiting for the bell to ring and then we'd stay after the bell rang for like an hour talking. And it was a totally relaxed, experience for them because they were actually surprised that I was joking like that. They were surprised that I would say the thing
It's
that they were
you're like, it's
thinking.
such a relief.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I've had meetings with people, because I interact with people all over the world for business, and they're men, I know how to hold the line. And so that's, I think, the thing is that a lot of women don't know how to do. They don't know how to hold the line. So they think it's a slippery slope. No, you're the one in control, women. You know, you are the one who can joke to a certain point, but to let, like, you don't even have to let people know, but just to your demeanor will tell them if you're being sexual or
Hmm.
not, or if it's just a joke. And so I think women have forgotten about that. They forgot, like, you can be funny, you can be sexual, you can make, the same crude jokes. And men are not going to think, oh, she's a slut. Okay, let me take advantage of her. They're going to laugh and go, what a relief. That's what I experienced with dads.
Yeah.
I didn't have
I
anyone trying to, like, get with me. It was just like, how refreshing, you know?
yeah. I think, you know, something that probably plays a role in it is age, and it's like when you're in your 20s, I think that everybody's more flirty and playful, and you have more social time where you're, going to be hanging out with a group of friends and acquaintances and chatting. So I think it's a lot easier for for that to be a more playful, fun, for everybody to be comfortable and to be themselves in this younger age. And then once you get into your 30s and you start having kids, and that's when there becomes this power struggle, like I don't feel like the power struggle is necessarily in the 20 somethings. I feel like, I mean, we're seeing it across the board in society, and that's why we're talking about it. But I think that in general, me and you see a lot more of it because we're becoming more mature, and that's really
Mm-hmm.
where, this, like, we're going to take back our power. And it's like, you know your power was never gone. You stopped using it,
They stopped using
in
their
this feminine
feminine
way.
power. And it just occurred to me that there's this thing that happens when a woman gets married. Her identity shifts from the sexual being that's, like, open to anybody, not anybody, but, like, open to, okay, I belong to this marriage, this person. Now I have this demeanor. So I need to, like, uphold this, like, not even a sanctity, but she becomes more, she's given permission to be more of a Karen, because it's like, no, I've got a family to take care of. I've got responsibilities. I'm not just carefree, like, but it's in a really complaining way. And we don't need to be like that, because we
Hmm.
don't have to prove to men, like, we're not sexual beings. So I think that that's where that misunderstanding is, for the, like, the woman doesn't get that. She doesn't get
Yeah.
that she doesn't have to cut off that sexual and, like, sexuality thing in that way, that she can just know, no, I'm not going to engage with all these men, but not have to act in a certain way in order to make that known, or to, it's almost like for her own self to make that known, not to them. It's like
Hmm.
she's almost saying to herself,
Yeah.
I've got to be this way because I'm like this now. And it's like, no, you really don't.
Well, I think that's something that, really transforms a lot of people when you have kids in a relation and you're in a relationship, is that, in your 30s, is that you have, you know a decade or more of being this fun, flirty, sexual human being. And then once you get into a monogamous relationship, you're like, okay, we're kind of grounding out. And then once you have children, that's when you're like, definitely not okay to be flirty with other people of the opposite sex, And so I think that that's one of the reasons why we have such a high divorce rate, and why a lot of couples, I feel like, are separating once they have, one or two kids that are only a few years old, is because there's this, like, you don't make me feel sexy anymore. And when you do try to make me feel sexy, I feel like you're just trying to have sex with me. So I'm not open to it unless I'm open to it. And then, and so there's this, like, grievance of, like, I wish I could be my old self. I wish I could be, and that's what I've heard from my co-parent, is that, finally felt like my old self again. I finally feel like I could go out and have some drinks and be flirty, and I want more of that, and it's like, well, yeah, you want the lifestyle you had before you had kids. You know, it's like we have to mourn that. And it's both sides of us, you know, like
Mm-hmm.
I had that same kind of lifestyle. Like I think that a lot of what is a real struggle is how undervalued, or not undervalued, how unrecognized the transformations that men's lives go through once you have children.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like obviously so much transforms in a woman's life. You know, it's like making a baby and nurturing and everything that goes into mothering your children. And I feel like now, you know, men are asked to do so much more than they were in the past, and we enjoy doing it. I mean, I enjoy spending time with my kids, and that's the highlight of my week is my few days I get to have with my kids. And so, but we have to give up so much as well. You know, we give up our hobbies, our interests, our, you know, everybody's finances change and there's no money for yourself, or, you know, like that's just not a priority. The extra money you have, you're not gonna, I don't want to go and spend it on, you know, going out or doing things for myself. It's like, well, I need to save this money for our home, our future, and like I need to, you need to give yourself a little allowance to not just wither.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, you know, I think that women are like go through this huge transformation. I think men understand it, and I think men go through a huge transformation as well. I think our lives change dramatically, and it's almost like, you know, there's no time to mourn for the loss of your freedom, you know, and that's just like that's what being a parent is. And it's difficult at times, and it's also super rewarding. You know, I think that it's really a matter of like how you want to think about it, and
Mm-hmm.
how, you know, is it something you feel like you need to mourn, or do you need to celebrate it? You know, it's like, let's celebrate that, you know, we can be adults now, and we have these children that are going to be our world and are our world. You know, it's like that old self is gone. I don't have to mourn it. I can celebrate it.
Well, I think the irritation or the crux of there's an issue here is that women feel like they have the right to complain and complain and complain and complain when they go through this transformation. And yes, I see that
It's like wearing you
affirmative
down.
nod, like so affirmative. So it gets really old hearing about that
Well,
because the men, I
you
just want to
tune it
say, like,
out.
the men go through that too. And they keep, like we were talking about earlier in our conversation, take everything on their back and more and more and more because they're trying to solve the problem that the woman is continuing over years to complain about. And they're like, sure, honey, I'll help you, I'll help you, I'll help you. And he's not maybe even wanting to complain or needing to necessarily complain, but there's a limit. So I think the women don't realize that it's like the man is just swallowing it for a long time over years. And I saw that in my husband. And I was like, he's been carrying a boulder and he can only carry it for so long. And something's got to drop because you can't keep piling it on. And even me, like in my relationship with him, like, I see he needs something. So I need to look into empathetically what's going on in his world, in his worldview, so I can get behind whatever it is that he needs, not coming at it
Mm-hmm.
like, what do I need so I can fix him so that he gives me what I want. So that's the view that I see here as the crux.
Yeah, I think something that women also probably need to hear is that, you know, when you keep hearing complaining and or you keep hearing nagging, it's just like a child. You know, the child's like asking like, hey daddy, hey daddy, hey daddy, hey mom, hey mom, hey mom. It's like at some point in time, you know, it's like I was gonna I it you tune it out, and then subconsciously it's still building up in the back of your mind, and you want to just be like, what? You know, finally, like instead of letting me like respond or what, you know, it's like you asked for 10 things and now I'm like, what is the one thing you really need? You know, like I don't even care, what is it? So it's like all of that complaining, it's not registering, it's
Mm-hmm.
sounding just repetitive like a small child. And then you get a negative reaction instead of being like, what is it, honey? What can I, you know, what how can I serve you today? It's like, you know, what? it's like you get that way when you have kids, and you have to have control. But at the end of the day, it's easier. It takes both parties. You're in a partnership. So if the woman can just recognize like he's not responding, let's look at the bigger picture. What can I do? Do I need to write this on a piece of paper so when I feel like he's got some attention or some time or some energy, I can address a couple things? Or, I think that's a big part of it and then, right there too, on the flip side, I feel like when I wanted to talk to my partner, she wasn't really available. It's like, I think that it's important for couples and relationships to make it a point to like make themselves available, not all the time, but like we got to be able to like take a look at we got to set up a time where we can look at and see what we can do to help each other.
Like an appointment, like to say, hey, at this point in time, like let's make a mark on our calendar so we can sit down and just talk about some stuff. Like
Yeah.
what I wanted to know from you is for women who are listening to this, can you kind of give the reactions that a man would have, all the different types of reactions that he would have if he's feeling that complaining and just trying to like grin and bear it, and what can they do when that happens? Like what are the actual
What can the men
reactions?
do, or
No, what
what
can
can the
the
women
woman
do?
do? So what are the reactions and what can the woman do to kind of take that back and make it more of a conversation?
Well, I think you should just kind of recognize if you're not getting the response that you're hoping for, that you need to take a different avenue of approach. And it's like, I think that my partner was pretty quick to give up and be like, well, there's never a good time to ask you for this stuff. And it's like, well, when you're piling more stuff on constantly, it is going to be difficult to find the right time. But I think that a lot of it has to do with like having a casual conversation where it doesn't have to be so serious. You don't have to be pushing, the to-do list. You can just, hey, when can we make some time to address some of the things that I want to do? Let's talk about our future goals. And I think part of it as well is to go and recognize that like, is it his responsibility? How much can we, delegate some of our responsibilities to help the team win? Because if you're going to continually think that it's his responsibility and you're going to put these other stereotypical housewife responsibilities on him as well, it's like, how can we create some balance? What I need you to do this for me. What can I do for you? Or, you know, and then to recognize, hey, like you're looking run down, what can we do to our schedule and our routine that might work better for both of us? Because I feel like for me, spending time with my kids is like my relaxed time. And so it's like, if you keep piling stuff on and I'm not getting to those lists and I'm not getting that stuff done, maybe we can go in, maybe you can do some of those things. And since all of the time with the kids is wearing you down, I can spend more time with the kids on this day and you can take care of some of the things on the list of things that you want to get done.
I think that's
I
what
think
women
that's,
can do is like look at the man's list and ask him
yeah.
what's on his list. Like, how can I help you? I do that. I consciously go,
But
how
but
can
I
I
have so
help
many things
you?
that I'm not able to do. How can I think about helping my man and his
Well,
list?
when I
It's like
help
that's the response.
him,
So
it
he can
it
help you.
alleviates him to help the family. When I That's what
Yeah.
people don't get, women don't get, is like when I take stuff off his plate, there's a sense of relief. And if he needs to, I know this sounds really old fashioned, if he needs to kick his feet up for like a day because he's been working like crazy, and I've been working too, not that I'm not, but then after that, he's raring to go for like projects that we want to do together or things that will help me. It's really a there's this law of reciprocity, which maybe people don't realize. And it's not like you do it tit for tat, like, well, I did this, so he should do this. But it's like this generous heart that just continues to overflow if you do that, you know?
Yeah. And it's not even a day. Like to me, the idea of
Right.
having
Not
like a
even a
whole day
day.
to put my feet up is like, I couldn't waste a day. There's too many things I want to do. But
That actually
even
never
just a
happens.
few hours.
Yeah.
No, I know. If you have kids,
If
know
you're
that
Aaron,
never
if you, yeah,
happens.
it never happens,
You
but
know,
an hour
um,
maybe.
just something that you can set up to go in and do, and it goes both ways. I think that's the real reason why women want to go and get their nails done or go have some beauty enhancing treatment. It's like, it's not that it's that treatment specifically, it's just some time
Hmm.
without the stuff and responsibilities of our life.
And I think that's
So
fine for women to do. They just real, and I don't see this a lot. That's why I'm saying women need to do this. I think that they need to look at the man's plate and see what are the tasks that I can take away from your plate. And if you do that, your man will be like just so happy, right? I mean,
yeah,
and feel loved and
absolutely.
supported.
Anybody will be happy, and I think that the other thing too is just not being so critical. It's like,
Mm,
if you feel like your partner is delicately dancing around in conversations and they're fearful of offending or triggering you, you're kind of being too serious. You're kind
mm,
of have too much of this balled up. And I think that it's society that's kind of balling it up. And it's like, we have so many influences in society. And I think that we're really susceptible to them. It's like we have this culture push that's pushing towards, um, end toxic masculinity, female empowerment, treated as equals. And it's like, you know I think that it's moving in a, I don't want to say it's moving in the right direction or the wrong direction. It's moving society in this one direction, and it's not for everybody. But since you have societies pulling people in this one direction, it's like women are going to go, well, I'm going to go with like what my girlfriend's telling me what to do, or I'm going to go from like what I'm getting from, you know, the daily talk show, and they're going to take their influences not necessarily for their own opinion. We're subject to being influenced by our culture, by society, social media, and I think that's pushing a lot of people out of their real nature and their general character. And so they're like, I need to be critical of my man. I'm not going to let him say shit around me, And it's like, well, now you're taking the comfort out of the relationship, so he's not able to be himself. You want to be treated as an equal, well, then I'm going to let you in on the inside joke that we're laughing about, even though it may not be super appropriate. You don't have to be serious. It's a joke. It's like, comedians say that all the time, like, the shit I'm talking about is not real and it is offensive and I shouldn't be judged because I'm just saying it to be funny, and it's
mm-hmm.
funny. I'm a comedian. That's my job. People laugh at it. And there is some truth to, the comics and the jokes that come at different people's expense. And that's why it's funny. It
Right.
doesn't mean that that's the way it is or the way that it has to be or that that person's a bad person. It's like, you got to laugh in life, and I think that a lot of the ability to joke around and have, um, like you said, just feel comfortable with your partner is being taken away by this society's push to, really make things equal and right. It's like, the real question is do women want to be treated as equals, or do they want to have men become feminized? Do they want to remove the masculinity, or do they want to feminize their men? Because it's like, you can't have one without the other. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
the way the scales tip. It's like, you want less masculine men, well, they're going to become more feminine. And then you don't want the feminine men because they're emotional and indecisive and having their issues, then it's going to tip. It's like, well, you want to go and have a scale is not designed to be sitting at perfect balance. It's like a scale in balance is easily shifts from either side. That's what it really comes down to in life. There's
Yeah.
no long-term stable consistency with life, especially in this current world.
Well, we have a choice, is what you're saying, to tip the scale in the way that we want instead
Yeah.
of just allowing the outer world, talk shows, social media, our friends tell us what women should do, how we should act, how we should be a certain way, defensive, and not let him get away with that kind of thing. That feels powerful. But like you said, in the big picture, what do we really want? And instead of saying, do we want a feminine man or a masculine man? Do we want to be happy? Do we want a
Yeah.
happy family? Do we want happiness in our lives? And I
Well,
see all these
I think
Karens stomping around unhappy.
something you talked about, a really important part is that, um, it's important for women to be able to like hold the line. You don't have to push the boundary. It's like, in this movement of end toxic masculinity, it's like you can hold the line at toxic, you know, let men be masculine. And it's like you can do that and you don't have to overcompensate. You can just be like, that's too far, honey, like,
Or you
and I
can
think
leave the
people will get that
conversation.
where it's like, but you can also still be there, well, I think that, there is an importance to that, of like you said, it's just like you hold the line. So it's like, the scale doesn't have to swing back and forth dramatically. It can just only go to some certain point, and I think that's really important for both sides to go and say, like, you know, okay, this is enough. You know what I mean? Like, I get what you're saying. I see where the line is. And if you're going to go, we don't need to go further than that. If I go any more into my masculine side, it is going to become, you know, toxic or belittling. But in the same essence too, if you're going to go masculine, take the female and coming into her like masculine dominant side, that's got to have a barrier line too. So I think culturally we need to have awareness, and that's the only way we're going to be able to do any shift. People will only learn from example. So I think, that's a really big takeaway. It's like, you know, be playful, be fun, let your partner be in their nature and their element and enjoy it. And if they start to take it a little too far, you don't have to go, oh, that's too far, you're over, like you're in the red. It's like, hey, honey, you know, and
You,
you can just do it with visual cues. You can do it with, literal, but don't hang on to it, because chances are he's just being kind of playful and he's pushing boundaries. And I think that that's one of the things that like women are kind of doing too, but they're never going to like really show it. They'll talk about it with their girlfriend. Oh, I stopped his bullshit. I called him out on this. I called him out on that. Um, but it doesn't feel good. It's not helping your family be happy. It's like you get a little win in the moment, but at what expense? So I think that's a
yeah, I'm
big part
thinking
of like,
about that response and what a woman is getting from that when she gets that pat on the back from her women friends. It's very short lived, like you were saying. There were so many things that I wanted to address that are just so right on. It's so right on. The part about the holding the line, I think it's not even with your man, but even with other men. It's so important to be playful. And I know some women are going to go, oh, well, she must be like hitting on other men. I'm not. Um, I have many men friendship relationships, including you, Zealous. I feel like, I can really talk. I can be myself. You can be yourself. And it's for the people who don't have boundaries, and some people you're not that close to, you're not really good friends with. If you feel like they're going over the boundary, you don't have to be so serious. I think that's the problem with a lot of women, is they're so serious and they take things so seriously and so personally. So if he is making a joke and it's too far, then you just can joke right back and just bring it into a different level of conversation. So I think there's a seriousness that is causing a lot of the problem, because we've lost that playfulness. Like you said, we have the three things that women need to be in order to really get involved with men and get along, is the queen and the mother and the enchantress. And the enchantress and the mother is really lacking these days. We've got the queen, the bitchy queen who can be in control, but then, really nurturing, and nurturing meaning like when, even when your husband is not asking you, just try to be like, see what he needs. That's the empathetic. And then the you really can shift your relationship with those two pieces. I mean, that for the woman, a man is already doing that. So men are already like trying to do all these things, but the woman is being so cold, and they're so in their queen right now. And you see that all over in social media, like the queen and like the goddess and well, what about those other parts? Yes, you're being honored, of course. Men honor you. That's not the problem. The problem is the interaction. So think about those
Yeah.
two pieces, the nurturing and the enchantress. Those are the interactive parts. Those are the things that are the muse for the man, that he's like, I don't know why she makes me feel so good, but I want to do everything for her. That's where the magic in that romantic relationship starts off with, that like mystery of like, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know where that comes from. She makes me feel so good. I just want to be with her. And we want that in our marriages. And so those are the
Yes.
parts that are missing, that make that queen critical, bitchy, all that. And then what that does to the man, well, we've just talked about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that your whole energy there. It's like the queen, it's like it's coming across as like a drag queen. Like that's your
Mm.
like, the when you put it out there like this queen, it's not like this majestic, female queen, who can sit there and serenity and know that she has the power to do whatever the kingdom needs to get done. It's this like sassy, like drag queen energy. Like that's just this whole like, female embodying the masculine energy, and it doesn't it, it doesn't feel good, and I don't think it's helping our families in the big picture.
Yeah, huge difference. I think if women thought of themselves as actually entering the drag queendom, they would step back a little
Mm-hmm.
bit, because I don't think they
Yeah.
see how male, masculine, it's like putting it on in a way of this male energy. And when you think of that drag queen, it's fake. That drag queen is
Mm-hmm.
not being their real self, whether it's a man or a woman. They're putting on this thing that they think that society they can control, they can make it work, they can flaunt it. And that sassiness, unfortunately, gets handed down to girls. I've seen it a lot. And that's a whole nother topic. I don't know if
Yeah.
we probably want to do that in a different show, but that's unhealthy for relationships. Sassy is
Yeah.
condescending, really, when it comes down to it.
I, I think something that is getting lost in the translation too is that I feel like this march against the toxic masculinity is it's kind of just going after this like 1% of men. I think that most men are not being I think most men are not being masculine, or not being toxically masculine. I think that they're staying within their nature, and if anything becoming a little more feminized just through everything in our culture and the hormones and our foods and just all these things. And I think that there's really this like, you know, the few fucking arrogant assholes that don't know what a real love relationship is, probably didn't have good parent role models or something of the sort. So they are this. I think the toxic masculine men are a very very low percentage of our population, but there's this joint group that we need to eliminate these men, and I can get that, but then the problem is that it's going into the homes. It's hitting our culture across the board. It's not able to just hit that culture. It's like I get told regularly, like, guys, it's your responsibility to call out men for their fucking masculine, their bullshit, their toxic masculine bullshit. And it's like, yeah, it is, but we don't see it. And it probably is more our job to maintain a little bit of a line than it is for a woman to be getting, you know, aggravated, because that toxic masculine dude, he doesn't give a shit what the woman thinks. It's like she has to get masculine to try to get under his skin or to stand up to him, but that dude's so far gone, it's not
Mm-hmm.
going to have any effect. But then the whole anger just kind of gets shouted out to men across the board. It's like, we're angry at you men. You're like, no, you're angry against that one asshole out there,
Mm-hmm.
and now we're taking the heat on it, and you're you know expecting us to call him out on it. But it's like, even if I call him out on it, he's not going to be receptive to it. Like, I think that's one of those things just to go and like recognize in our society, is that it's a couple of bad apples are ruining the whole harvest.
Yeah, it's like treating all men like they're the wife beater alcoholic, when that's an illness. That's a person who is far gone. You're not going to get him back. He needs help. But for most part, all the dads that I know and the ones that are in marriage problems or separated or divorced, they're going overboard. They are such great dads. They're trying to do everything. So they are not the ones at fault, but the women are placing the blame on the man because he's not fulfilling this fantastical image and dream of what she thinks a man should be today, which is not fair. It's like the two worlds of the knight in shining armor, but then also that man who champions the feminist and but at the same time like does all the thing. It's like these two opposites that she hasn't even in her mind figured out what is that? Is that even a real thing? That's not even it doesn't hold up to any of the feminist promise or the Cinderella promise. Like you're asking for all these different things that are oxymorons and then acting like the man is not fulfilling his role. So it's really I don't know. I feel like I feel so bad for men because they're put in a box, and they're not able to fulfill
I'm
any of
curious.
those.
I'm curious what your idea is if men can get their masculinity back. I feel like it's one of these things that like once you've taken on all of these female roles and you're getting this equality, when you realize it isn't working and you try to get your masculinity back, you try to get your balls back, it's like you can't sew them back on. It almost feels like I don't know if it's going to take a lot of understanding from the woman, and I think that's one of the reasons we're trying to have these conversations. It's conversations with men, conversations for men that women need to hear, because it's like ultimately they need to be making the change as much as men. But if the man is asking him to make this change, well, that's just more of that masculine bullshit. So they're not even going to be receptive to it. They've got to find it on their own and really think about it and go, is what I've been doing working? Like, what can I do to make this work? And it's like, I think that a lot of women are just going, it's time to start over. I'll just make him pay for it, and I'm going to just move on. And then that isn't, it isn't helping your family. It's like you're getting a little more, you're getting you back, but then how many of those relationships they're gonna move into are gonna be healthy? It's
Yeah.
do you think men can, how do we get our masculinity back without like saying it? It's like we have to get couples talking about this stuff before it's too far gone, I think is really the key. And for women just to go and recognize, I think you've said it before, it's ultimately the women that are going to have the real impact, because it's like, I feel like the men we're damned if we do, we're damned if we don't, it's like,
Definitely.
you're not going to win fighting it, and you're not going to, any sort of manipulation is going to be, sensed as non-genuine. So it's like, how do we, and I think that it's really just a matter of like, man, you kind of got to stay in your masculine. Don't give up too much ground. Don't let that line get pushed too far in either way, And I think that's really, the takeaway for couples is to go and like recognize of like, okay, we're up against this wall and we could push either way, but let's move forward instead of pushing against each other.
Right. I think that's a good point. Our viewer, I'm going to put his comment up here, Devon James, thank you. He says, we just need more feminism. LOL. That's what men have been trying to do. That's what women think we need. That is totally not working. And I know, Devon, you get that because you're LOLing it. Yeah. You get that. So I know I have a male friend who said he gets together with a lot of his male friends and they're starting to talk like this. They didn't before, but because you need an outlet. So here's your outlet, you can talk with us and we can voice what it is that you're feeling too. So I lost track of where we were going with, but you had some, good points.
Well, I think that, what a big part of it is to go and say, like, with this championing of like feminism, I think that it's like women are awesome. Like, I like women more than I like men. I think the thing that is becoming the underlying current is that it's not championing feminism, it's championing female dominance, female power. It's not just like we need to empower the weak females. Like, yes, we do need to empower the weak females, but we also don't need to overinflate the strong ones, because what's happening is these strong females are like, we're going to stop masculinity. It's toxic masculinity, but it's what it's becoming is stopping masculinity. And it's right there with that same situation of like, it's the 1% of males that's the fucking asshole that there's no hope for. And that's what all of society is changing to try to get that one asshole in 100. And then I think there's probably a similar thing going on with the females, where it's like, there's this one scorned female that is, on a mission, and she's going to rally the troops and get the support. And it's like, it's not necessarily everyone's feelings or vibes, but it's like, well, we got to support our sisters. We got to have each other's backs. And it's like, well, what are we really fighting for?
Mm-hmm. And it's a
what
false
are we really
power.
fighting for?
It's a false power because it doesn't actually work with interacting with men. It's like, it is the war. It's a war on toxic masculinity, but it's a war on men. And European women know this. They talk about this. They laugh at Americans in the way that we interact with our men, because they see how it's not working, and they see our divorce rates, and they don't agree. I've heard this through men that interact with European women. And so it's interesting because I don't have any European women friends, but they're telling me that the way that the European women interact is in a more real feminine way. And they're powerful. I mean, you think about French women and their attitude and their sexiness.
Well, when you think about it, it's like ultimately women are the ones that have the choice on whether or not you're going to have sex, And so that right there is just like, it is the most powerful thing, And it's like, I think that women don't want to be treated as sex objects, or they don't want to have to use their sexuality to control, but you have way more control in your sexuality than any other way out there. It's like you could take the most masculine men ever, and a woman, that's going to give the allure of the most feminine thing possible, lovemaking, and she's the one that has control of that. The most alpha dude of all, the whole kingdom is going to go, I'll do whatever she says, And so
that's why people kill over sex.
Women have really had the goal. Yeah. And that's why, And I think that, that's something that you're talking about, like European women and the femininity. It's like, those women are like, we know what you want. And if you want it, like, you better flirt for it. You better put on your show. You better show me your best. And, and secretly, not necessarily even secretly in their mind, they're like, I'm just waiting for the right one that I'm going to choose, or, when my partner really does something awesome. Yes. But it's like, that's where the real power is. And I think that's one of the real conflicts that we're having in society, is that women don't want to use their sexuality as their ultimate power. But it's like, you have that choice, and that gives you the superpower that will get, it's
that is such good insight. Overlooked. That is such good insight, Zelis. Women have this odd relationship with sexuality in America, and they're afraid of it. They are, they flaunt their sexuality in some ways, and then they shut it down in other ways, and they're afraid of it in other ways. And if you think about the difference in posture of a woman, American woman, and a French woman, or a European woman, not necessarily British, but just think like probably French as the example. But there's a strength to that French woman. She can be really sexual, but that doesn't mean that every man can have sex with her. And every man knows that.
No.
That there's you've got to prove that you're like.
And they don't even have to give it sex. It's just like, I've got the magic key over here,
Yeah. And it's part of who they are.
Who wants to try for it?
Right. And even if they're not engaging in a sexual like banter, or even, they can still hold that sexuality within their personality and their aura with children, with grandparents, because they're a feminine being. So that can be
Mm-hmm.
part of who they are without being sexual, even though it's part of her sexuality, it's part of her feminism. So it's not even like you're wielding your sex as a tool, because I think that's what American women do sometimes, is they're seeing it as a tool. I'm going to do this and I'm going to do this. But if it can be more of, this is just natural. This is just who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes with the territory of interacting with me. If you interface with me as any being, you're going to have
Mm-hmm.
this sexual being that's not necessarily wanting to have sex with you. It's just part of me, like part of a child. A child is a sexual being, whether you like it or not. But we're not like always focusing on that. But the problem I think with a lot of women is they think that they're always being focused on as a sexual being. Well, no, you're not. You're a human being and you happen to be a sexual being. So like to realize that that can help to interact with people as people. Did we forget that people are people, men are people? Women forgot that. It's like they're people. you
Mm-hmm.
they're not after you for your body
Yeah.
necessarily. Like maybe your body's not that cool. you know?
Well, it makes me think of this post that I saw the other day, and I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was like something to the effect of like, people talk about women's sex way too much. It's either she has too much sex, or she doesn't have enough sex, or she has uh, children too young, or she has children too late, or the choices she's making about aborting a child, and all of these things that have to do with sex that are just talked about. And it's like, just shut the fuck up. Like, it's none of your business what a woman wants to do with her body. It's her body. Don't shame her for being sexual. Don't shame her for being not sexual. Don't shame her for having children young. Don't shame her for having children when she's old. It's like, don't shame her for not wanting to have children.
Right.
It's like,
It's
it's
personal.
her body, it's her business. And I think that's something that, especially in our culture, has become such a fucking nasty part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, it's like, dudes are sluts, most of them,
Yep.
but we're not shamed for it. And it's like, but women get shamed for that. And then it's it doesn't make sense.
Well, there's
It's
nothing wrong with
really,
sexuality, but in a woman's mind
and
there
we all get
is.
that. Yeah, it's this two-sided thing where it's like, yeah, nothing wrong with having that sexual, if you've had a good relationship with somebody and you've had a good intimate relationship, that it's the most fulfilling, awesome thing in life is to have sweet, enchanting lovemaking. So it's like,
Mm-hmm.
why should somebody be shamed for that? And it's like, you don't know if just because she left with somebody at a party that they didn't have some real intimate experience. It's like, whatever.
And even
It's
if
their
it's not
choice.
intimate, it's her choice. It's personal. I mean,
Yeah.
that's her choice. She's going through whatever she needs with that. That's fine. I think I just keep looking at the French woman. It's like she can go to a board meeting and interact with men, and she can also take one home and have it impersonal or personal, or she can have a lover and have it be deeply like a long-term relationship. I mean, she can be a mother at the same time, and it's all okay in the French perspective. That's freedom, but that's acceptance also. It's like we are
Mm-hmm.
who we are and accepting that we are all these beings all at once. And a woman can be that. And we don't need to, like you were saying, shame any woman for being any one of those things. Those are all part
Yeah.
of who we are. And some of it is personal. It's like, who are you to say what I can do?
I think that maybe we can try to usher in this new movement, since we have this movement of social acceptance for transgender and gender identification. Let's move into a greater acceptance of female sexual choice, where it's like, you have to be able to like accept some people are more open to sex than others, and it's none of your business. Just like with people's gender topics. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you our society and our culture is starting to realize, like, hey, we got to like accept these people for who they are, and it doesn't make them right or wrong, good or bad, and it's none of our business. Let's not make them feel bad for it. And it's right there with the sexuality.
That is so true. It's an identity thing, and it's right and wrong. And if we can, like you're saying, if we can treat women who decide to be like step into their sexuality and embrace it as embracing, yeah, the transgender. I mean, it's like we're all beautiful people with
I
sexuality included, human beings.
mhm. I think that it's just thinking about this a little bit. It's such an interesting topic. Is where does it come from? You know, and I think
Mm.
that to look at it, my first thought is like, well, it comes back to that like women have that power and that key and that superpower, and so women that aren't going to use it are going to be like, she's just using her sexuality to get what she wants, and so they're actually the ones that are the slut shaming
Mm.
is the women, and it's because this woman is getting what she wants, she's using her power, and you know they don't want to use their power, so there becomes this like, well, fuck her, like, you know what I mean, she's a slut, like we don't want to hang around with her, you know, she might sleep with one of our female or male friends or whatever. You know, I think that that slut shaming really kind of has come about more from the women than the men. I mean, I think the men will jump on the bandwagon and talk shit about whatever, you know, they can on some level. But you know, kind of really coming to like, where is the origin of this shaming people for sexuality? And I think a lot of it has to do with women that aren't using their superpowers being judgmental of the ones that are.
I'd like your opinion on this because I probably fall into the person who's being slut shamed. Not necessarily. I mean, I'm totally not having sex with other people outside my marriage, but just for the fact that I am good friends with a lot of guys, we have deep, long conversations, and I'm not one of those that says, you know, like I forgot what the you go girl or the empowerment, all that empowerment speech, you know, that women get together and complain about their husbands. I don't get into that kind of conversation. And so there's that group, and then there's the women who are just, I guess, maybe more relaxed about their sexuality. And I don't even know what my question is. I'm just seeing that there's these two different groups. And so for men that see these two different groups, what's the viewpoint with that? Do you know what I'm talking about? These two different types of women?
Yeah, and I think that a lot of it is just kind of like recognizing like, oh, this person is you know, she's open, she's playful, you know, like I can joke around with you and you're not going to judge me. I feel like, you know, you could hear me say some stupid shit and you would laugh at it and then you would correct me. You know, you wouldn't just be like, "Oh no." You don't put on that queen no attitude. It's like, do you see what's really happening? Look at this. Just rewind, you know, and it's like, "Oh, that's such a better way." Like now I'll take a look at that perspective, because if you just throw up the wall, you know, and so it's like, it's just one of those things of like, hey, if you're not going to be receptive to my conversation, or at least, you know, have a playful interaction, if I have to be on my tippy toes, then it's not a positive interaction, and I'm not going to pursue more of it. Where it's like, if you can just be um, entertained and hold that line and be yourself, and you know, like, let's face it, like some guys get along with guys, some women get along better with women. I'm right there with you. I get along really well with women. I've always had lots of female friends, you know, and I think you probably get along really well with men. Fortunately, you live with three of them, um, and that's, you know, I think that's who you are. I'm not going to judge you for it. I'm not going to think any more or less of you. I enjoy our conversations probably more just because of who you are, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and that's just, everybody's got to accept they are who they are. And I think really kind of having that acceptance on a society level is going to go, yeah, okay, we can accept that most people are just fine. They're all going to fit in the scale wherever they're supposed to be. And if they're happy and content in their place, that's what you want. You want them to be happy and content in their place. And, you know, and to go and like recognize that, like, that one asshole that's irritating you, there's no changing him. There's no getting through to her. You know, you can't tell Karen anything, you know. Um, with she's just not going to be receptive to anything you tell her, is what the point is, you know. Um,
Yeah.
so, let's not worry about those people. Hopefully those people can go through some sort of transformation and self-awareness and recognize like, not really being genuine, kind of lost my shit. And there's probably some other issues going on in there, psychologically, emotionally, chemical balance in the brains. We're subjected to a lot of things. I think there's got to be a reason why this is happening. It's not just the social media and the
Mm-hmm.
society. It's
It's
everything,
everything.
it's everything.
Yeah, I'm visualizing a world. Actually, I'm visualizing like just a family unit. It's kind of interesting with extended family there, grandmas and grandpas and uncles and all these people and kids, and having men be completely relaxed to have these joking around conversations that they would just have, and everyone laughing. Like even the children, and the mom's not going, don't say that around the kids, but just like having the kids be, and the grandparents and everyone being like, that is just so funny. That's just like silliness. That's just banter. That's, there's sexuality in play. There's whatever in play. There's maleness. There's, being that strong male that is stereotypical, that is going to come from a certain angle, and being okay with it. And just being like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, this is all great conversation.
I think that, it's where we were and it's the direction that we're moving away from. We have such this, you know, judgment on language and more regulation, whether it's government or just society. And it's like it's a lot more difficult to just be playful and have fun and to recognize like people can say funny shit. It doesn't mean that's what they're thinking all the time.
Right.
Don't hold on to the like. I feel like that's something I was crucified for, is like something I might say would be like registered as like that's how I felt forever. And I
Mm.
was like, I was just making a crack, or I
Just
was
riffing
commenting
or
on how
something.
somebody else said something and I thought it was funny. But it's like, that confrontation thing becomes this trigger point, and then it would just fester and inside her. And so I would say something not even in the same category, but then it would be like, no. Um, so yeah, let's try to enjoy life a little bit more. Let's try to enjoy comedy, and instead of looking at oppositions of belief, let's look at the similarities and the things that we can relate on, because that's what we need as a society and as a culture to grow and evolve, is to have more good times, more enjoyable moments, and to not let stuff get under your skin and bother you, and to recognize that I think a lot of the issues that we have with stereotypes is actually a very, very small number of people in the world. And you can't go on a brigade of like this whole race, whether or class or stereotype maybe, but just to recognize that like men are people too, women are people too. Women, you have the superpower. You don't have to use it, but you can play with it, and that is going to give you more control in your life than trying to become masculine in the name of femininity to get something that you think you want that might not even be what you want, you
Mm-hmm.
know
Mm-hmm. Perfect, perfect words. I mean, that's exactly what I think everyone needs to hear. It's like those are the things that will bring us forward, and that's how we can step into this modern engagement in how we do relationships. So I feel like that's embodying the French woman, accepting your sexuality, being playful, holding the line, knowing that treating each other as human beings, and and men will respond, women, if you treat them as a human being and play and nurture and just encompass like all of that we used to be with our modern smartness and power. It's
yeah.
pretty simple.
I think there's an interesting question that I just have, is it's like people think they want power, but then sometimes when you get power, you're like, now I'm put in this position where I have to make hard choices. And you think that you want to be in that position. And then you realize this sucks. I don't want to have to be the like decider. It's like when you're thrown like two shitty outcomes, it's like, well, yeah, everybody wants to make the good decisions. We all want to decide on how we're going to have fun so that it might be a little more to their nature. But when it comes down to those, like, fucking, what are we going to do? Hard choices, they suck. You don't want to be put in that position.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you do. I think that's a very rare person that wants to be in that position, but we all have to make those choices at some point in our life.
You know what
So,
that's about?
uh,
It's about the American idea of happiness equals freedom of choice. So there's those two things that are tied greatly in our society. And if a person doesn't have freedom of choice, they feel that their happiness has been taken away. That's only an American thing. If you look at China, if you look at some of these other cultures, it's not about freedom of choice. I think we've talked about this. It's about the whole. It's about how is this as a whole family, as a whole unit, going to make happiness. And that's why a lot of Asian families live together, extended families. So if we take that, the freedom of choice, and happiness, and really examine that to say, is that the end all be all? If we're hanging on to that and fighting for that, look at the cause around that. Is that cause around that actually worth?
now, being in this COVID quarantine, I think that there is a lot of, like, unique happiness that comes out from this fact that, like, we don't have a choice.
Yeah.
We recognize something much bigger is happening, and I don't get the choice of which park to go to. I don't get the choice of, where whether I go to work today or not. It's like, we're kind of all like, our choices are limited now, and so you you find that you can be just as happy with very few options, and maybe even more happy in some ways, because you don't have to make the decision to go and load up all the gear and take the whole family on this, outing across the state. It's like, nope, we got to just make do with what we have. We got to stay home, and you're having fun. It's like, you're still making memories. You're probably making more memories playing games with board games with your kids, and building barns and going to the lake that you can go to, than running her all over doing all these different things that we do in our day-to-day life.
People are really enjoying this time because of that. And there was a study that I heard in this podcast, Hidden Brain, which I love, Hidden Brain, and they were talking about arranged marriages versus the freedom of choice marriages. And the thing is that most Americans would be like, I would never be happy in an arranged marriage. Well, as we can see, we're given only certain choices in this pandemic situation, and so the thing is, we can be happy with that if we feel like these choices are being made on our behalf of well-being. So if someone's doing something and they're saying, you have to do this, and it's not based on our well-being, then we're not going to trust that. We're not going to feel safe. But if we know that, say, someone has arranged a marriage, that's big, but that it is for our well-being, and it's a given to us that yes, they actually care about me, the survival of myself, that my longevity of my family and everything, then you're bound to listen to that and feel trust in that and kind of relax in that, as opposed to having the freedom of choice and seeing all the choices in front of you, so that the one that you do pick and choose, you don't trust that. It's like, can we trust ourselves? We don't necessarily trust ourselves. And especially if we don't trust ourselves, then we're looking at the sea of other people, the thousands of people that could be the better partner. And there's always going to be that possibility of the better one, even if we make a choice.
Yeah, I think that's totally one of those things that we have. We second guess our decisions, and not everybody does, but I think that's something that can be very difficult. And it's like, you're only going to second guess your choice if you were the one that made it. So if you can just accept what's given to you, then you'll make the best of it. But if you made the choice yourself, then you start looking at, did I make the wrong choice? Was there a better option I didn't see? Should I have whatever?
Well, what's interesting is Aaron
So,
and I actually talked about marriage as a choice before we got married. And we talked about how when you make that choice, you go all in that choice, because if you don't go all in, then you end up with that other
Yeah.
perspective. And the
Mm-hmm.
fact that you go all in and you know that it's a choice, and you know that I've laid the groundwork so I can build or not, or I can walk away. But if I build, it will become what I make it. And
Yeah.
so a lot of times people, they start building and then they get cold feet and they're like, oh, what's over there? Maybe I could build there. But if you just stick with what you have, and if both of you are making that choice consciously, you can make it whatever you want. Just like we're remodeling our house, I think of it like that. Like, we can make it whatever we want as long as we both
Mm-hmm.
know that we have the choice and that we're on it together. Then, the sky's the limit in a sense, to a certain degree, but it's that perspective. It's that knowing that you are consciously choosing and saying, I'm embracing that choice. But both
Yeah.
partners need to do that.
I think that, that's definitely something in my situation. I wasn't married, I was engaged. But then like having kids and then having one child and then having more kids, it was like, I'm not going to look back. There's plenty of like red flags that I recognized I was jumping over, but it was like, I'm going to go all in, like that's what I'm into. And to have my partner be like, no, like I'm not happy, you're not happy, and separating is going to be the key to our happiness. It's like, well, we're right in the thick of it. Like my happiness is not the most important thing, and I'm all in here. And if you're not, then I'm honestly a little relieved. It wasn't my choice. So I think that kind of made accepting my fate a lot easier to just know, I was all in, and there was definitely some things that some concerns and issues that I was accepting, but to be like cut loose and not having to be the one to make that choice was a unique situation that I think in some ways I would have just assumed stayed all in, because I think that's where I was going. And that's why I was having kids. That's where I could see the potential, and I knew the direction we were going. And I felt like, yeah, it's it's a unique blessing in some ways. But it's also, you have to accept the fate you're given.
I see it as still in the house parallel of like building a house. I mean, if one partner wants to buy that money pit that you're like, oh, I don't know. But then you're like, okay, let's go ahead and do it. And then you're all in and you're building it and you're like, yeah, we can do this. And then she's like, oh, like when you're in the thick of it, she's like, I don't know. I'm seeing it now as a money pit. Like, is it ever gonna end? And then she walks away at that point, and you're like, but we were just getting to
But
like that edge of
I
like
just
making
got the
it
foundation
better.
set.
Yeah.
That's it. It was like we just got the foundation leveled. Like the rest of the house was gonna,
It's gonna fall into place
fall into
easier
place.
now, right? It's like that's the thing about I really believe I see a lot of relationships where they are at that point where they're in the thick of it, and that's the best. It's like that's the best when they're in the thick of it, because then you've gone through a lot of stuff that's all the like superficial early on relationship stuff, and then in the thick is where you learn. That's where you're like, you
Yeah.
get over the
Oh,
hump, and then you're like, phew, we just grew together as a couple, like through these really hard times. But in the thick
yeah.
is where so many people leave. They think that they
I
put it
know.
all in, but what the women do is they put it all in by themselves. They've tried on their own, like, okay, I'm going to try, but they've not had that conversation with the guy. Like, I feel like this is it. If I'm at the edge, so if we don't do something, the foundation's going to crack. They don't have that conversation. They're like, I'm going to do all this stuff at the foundation and see if it works, but I see it's not working, so I'm going to leave now. Because I don't think I don't have faith in him that he's going to be able to do his part. It's like, well, you
Well,
didn't
it's
include the guy.
yeah. It's when you're in the thick of it that people's like real nature and their real selves come out. And I think that's what it comes down to. It is like, are you going to hit the eject button, or are you going to do everything you can to try to make it work?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think that that's you know, a real sign of character, you know, and that's it's where it's
The
definitely
rubber meets the
challenging, but it's
road.
also like, yeah, that's it, man.
Well, I think in these pandemic times, people, even if they are separated, they are either going further or they have the chance to come closer. You know, because we're
That's definitely what I'm
stretched.
feeling.
We're
Yeah.
stretched in so many ways that it's like, okay, should we really come together now? Because we're in this survival life or death situation. So there is that moment for you out there, you guys. You can examine what you've been doing. You can decide maybe to examine and maybe come together and have conversations. It starts with communication, with conversations. They don't have to be heavy, but just reconsider some things. Your choice. Are you still looking out there for better? Are you, you know, being the Karen and not empathizing? Are you the
Yeah.
man who's given up because the Karen has been the Karen so much, but maybe now she's softer because she's staying at home all the time. She can't, like it's a different world. So there's that possibility right now that maybe some people can take advantage of or like just get
Yeah.
on board with. Those are my thoughts. All right. How are you feeling?
Well, I feel good. I feel like we could wrap this one up, or we could talk for another couple hours.
Well, we've got to save some stuff for next week. So,
Yeah, you know, I think maybe we could try to figure out what it's like for Karen. How do you end up in that position of like entitlement, and what is it that they really want? You know, I think that's something that we should all be concerned of, because it's growing in awareness. We're seeing it more and more, and it's like, what does that person really want? Why is Karen happening? What can we do to help that?
that's a good
But
point.
yeah,
All right, that sounds great. It's always good, Zealous. It's so fun. I love
yes,
it.
likewise.
All right, I see you have a guest
I
behind
think
you.
so.
Men that women need to hear. We'll see you next week. Take care.
Alrighty.